Hi, I'm Mike Jones. This afternoon, I sat down with Herman Baertschiger and we hashed over the details of the recall yet again. So this is pretty exhaustive here, this coverage of this. Now, it has been mentioned to me that I am somehow biased. I can tell you right now that you cannot get as far into this as I am now and not have made some sort of a judgment as to which way things are going. It is true. I have made a judgment about that. And perhaps it may affect how I ask certain questions or whatever, but I will tell you this. I offered people a venue to come and air their views, and I allowed them to do that. None of them were cut off or were told to not say something that they wanted to say, and I may have pushed back a little bit on them, but hey, that's my right. This is my thing here. If somebody comes on with me and I talk to them, I get to say what I want to say too. Okay? I gave a couple hours of my day to the recall committee. I gave a couple hours to John West, and I gave a little over an hour to Herman. You know, I gave the time to the people to say what they wanted to say. And I'm under no obligation to offer objectivity at all. Okay? So understand that. You're not getting objectivity when you watch the news. We all have biases. And it doesn't stop people in politics from speaking with newscasters who are biased against them or for them. And they never mention that, except in very rare occasions at one end of the interview or the other. They just happen. That's the way it is. So I think I was pretty fair in how I dealt with everybody. And you know what? If you don't think that I asked the right questions of people, then I encourage you to ask them yourself. You can certainly do that. The commissioner's doors are open. You can talk to them anytime you want to. It was very easy to get these interviews. And the recall committee, I'm sure if you call and talk to them or stop by one of their locations or something, I'm sure they're more than happy to talk to you. More than happy to take your question into consideration. So, I'm not a neutral arbiter. I am trying to be fair, and I believe I have faith in the process. Unlike some people, there are some people that want nothing but to shut up the other side. That's not me. I want you to hear what they have to say. And I think I've been fair in doing that. Okay. So that lecture's over. Herman Baertschiger on the recall. Let's go. So I'm joined by Herman Baertschiger. He is the one of the 3 commissioners here in Josephine County. And we're going to go over the recall points. And at a later date, we will get into other topics. There's a brand new fire district that's coming to Josephine County and the proposed fire map issues. And that gets pretty deep. So that will be a later podcast.
Both of those will affect your tax book, your wallet, I mean.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just jump right in with number 1. the bad faith negotiations in the pipe. Oh, no, you were going to start with the Sportsman's Park, which was brought up by Jay Meredith in our recent podcast with him.
Well, it's really interesting, Mike, and thanks for having me here, because I listened to their whole tape. I listened to everything they had to say. I took some notes. They got some things they got correct, other things they got really incorrect. So we kind of just go through this. First off, they talked about the Sportsman Park giveaway. I think that's the label the Courier gave it, the giveaway. Mm-hmm. And so here's the story. First of all, it should have nothing to do with the recall of Commissioner West, because he wasn't even around when we did this. This was before his time. And when he was campaigning...
Yeah, and in fairness, that is not included in here.
No, but they brought it up.
They did mention it.
They did mention it. That's right. And he had nothing to do with it. And if my memory serves me correctly, he was neutral on it when he was campaigning. So he didn't have nothing to say about it. But here's the deal with the Sportsman Park, folks, because you didn't get it right in the Courier, okay? What happened was our parks director came to us and said we're in violation of a grant. So we received a grant for $11,000 for some restrooms at the sports park in the 1990s. And the commissioners of the day encumbered all those lots, all those properties that make up the Sportsman Park, that they can never be developed. Okay, that has to remain open in perpetuity. So they receive $11,000 and they encumber the property forever. I can't believe it. So we were in violation of that grant because we leased out a piece of that property for a cell tower. That put us in violation. That's how I didn't even know we owned the Sportsman Park, and neither did the other two commissioners. I always thought it was owned by the Sportsman's Association. Anyways, that's what triggered it. Once it was triggered, our insurance company said, well, we didn't know you owned a shooting range either. And we don't know if we're too interested in insuring it. They pretty much told us they weren't too. They alluded to that they were not.
It's almost getting to where insurance companies won't insure anything.
Right. So we came up, our legal team came up with this. They said, look, we can sell it to a nonprofit group, because when we dispose of property, it has to go up for bid at a sheriff's sale, okay?
Okay.
But if you're a nonprofit, we can negotiate it out. So we went to the Sportsman's Association, and their association, they got a board of directors, a 501(c) and all that stuff, their nonprofit group, and they said, would you be interested in this property? We'll give it to you for $1. We'll sell it to you for $1. And they said yes, and we said we're going to put a deed restriction in there, though. The deed restriction is that if you ever shut it down or it's closed to the public, then it reverts back to the county. The property does. Okay? So basically what we said, as long as you run it the way you have for the last 40 years, it's yours. The county has no liability now. It's off our rolls. You can have the cell tower. That's $16,000 a year. I hope that keeps you whole and helps you keep up the property and everything.
Did you happen to hear Pat Fahey on with Bill Meyer this morning?
Yes, right.
And I forget what it was, but he was saying that was still some issue with you guys giving that away. It doesn't take away the liability somehow.
So he's talking about the lead contamination. The lead contamination is going to follow us to the end of time. But with shooting ranges across the country, as long as they're continued as shooting ranges, lead is not an issue. It's only when you stop that activity and try to repurpose the property.
That makes sense.
That's when it comes to issue. So I don't even know what Mr. Fahey was talking. The liability, we wanted out of the liability of what happens out there. We're never going to get out of the liability of what has happened, okay? That's always going to follow us, but all the other liabilities that could happen out there. So it's a perfect match. Nothing changes at the Sportsman's Park. The association still runs it. It's their property, and the county has no liability if somebody gets hurt out there or anything like that. So, and if they ever shut it down, the county gets the property back. I think that's a really good thing for the taxpayers. So that's the Sportsman part. But John West had nothing to do with it. So I don't know why they brought that up. So let's see. Will of the people, Pipe Fork.
Yes, Pipe Fork, bad faith negotiations in the Pipe Fork property sale. Now, bad faith negotiation to me would be you negotiate under a certain premise and then you flip it at some point later. The way I see this, because I've looked at a lot of this, I've heard opinions from different people. That seems to me now they entered into the negotiation with the idea of keeping this open to the public. And then later, that condition, I guess they thought that wasn't as important later when they wanted to close the deal with the BLM or something in that nature.
So this has actually started right before I came on as a commissioner. So, I didn't come in the middle of the show, but I came after the first 30 minutes. So anyways, Pipe Fork, that 320 acres is a piece of land that is part of our forestry department. We have about 40,000 acres, give or take. And we manage that on a sustainable yield. And the money we raise from selling the timber off of that, we pay for our juvenile justice pretty much, and a few other things. There's certain things we can pay for and certain things we can't. So that's what we do. It's a pretty good program. It kind of has to. We have a forestry reserve fund, and we like to keep that reserve fund pretty high because the market for timber fluctuates, and so some years you're not selling as much, and other years you're selling more, and so we want to keep a pretty good chunk of money in that reserve program, so we have steady funding for juvenile justice, and a few other little things. Well, the people in Williams wanted that property. They came to us, they said, oh, we don't want you to log that. This is a special property, has a waterfall, and that's neither here or there if it's a special property. I mean, Oregon's got a lot of beautiful pieces of property. But anyways, that's what they want. So they made a proposal. Now, remember what I told you about Sportsman. We can't get rid of a piece of property unless it goes through a sheriff's sale. Unless it's a nonprofit. There's an exception in the statute. So they come up with a conservation group that's a nonprofit, and they said, we want you to sell that to them. And then the plan was, we're going to sell that to them, and they're going to sell it to BLM. So then the BLM says, well, if we're going to buy it, we have to do a yellow book appraisal. And that's a government appraiser. And so BLM had a yellow book appraiser done on it. It come out to $2.1 million. And our forestry manager or supervisor, director, he says, no, it's worth about 2.8. Okay, so there's a difference there. So then, and I'm kind of fast forwarding this a little bit because there's been meetings for years.
Yeah.
Then I said, look, why don't you come up with some extra money and we'll try to meet you in the middle there. So the Williams folks said they came up with $300,000 more. So that's 2.4. We're still at 2.8. We said, perfect, we'll sell it to you. John West was not too keen on that. Dan DeYoung and I said we would sell it to you. Then I said, we had BLM come in to one of our meetings. I asked them some questions. I said, can you guarantee it's going to be open to the public? And they said, no, we can't guarantee it. None of our land is guaranteed to be open to the public. We can close it for this or that, whatever. And I said, well, wait a second. They said they wanted this property because people love to go up there and enjoy the waterfall and the big So I said, at that time, I said, I want to put a deed restriction there. It has to be open to the public. Well, they said, that's a deal killer because BLM will never go for it. But I said, that's what you wanted at the beginning, and now you don't want it. So the last word on the last meeting was, I told them, you put a deed restriction that it's open to the public, exactly like we put a deed restriction on the Sportsman. It has to remain open to the public. You can do that. Pat Fahey says, oh, I don't know if you can write that kind of language. We already did it. So anyways, they weren't interested, and they said that's bad faith negotiations. Right now, it's open to the public. Right now, it's county. All of our county land's open to the public.
Right. And if that's what they wanted, then they're just going to have to take the risk that, there may be some select cut in there at some point in the future.
Well, BLM could cut it. They could cut it.
Right. Yeah, but I think what they're doing, they're banking that they won't cut it.
They won't cut it.
Yes.
Now, the myth is, and I've heard this out of Fahey, we could have used that money to fund the sheriff and everything. If we would have got that $2.4 million, we'd have to roll it right. We'd have to go buy some more property for forestry.
You can't do that.
You can't go fund.
Has to stay in forestry.
Right.
And then but profit that you make from timber sales, repeated timber sales on it, is usable.
That is usable for certain things. It's not real general fund money.
Okay, so
it's earmarked.
What is that? What is the earmark on that?
Juvenile justice.
That's it.
And a few other little incidentals, but it's mostly juvenile justice.
You couldn't give the sheriff extra funding from that?
Be honest with you, there's not. By the time you fund juvenile justice, there's not a lot of extra.
Understood. Yeah. As I recall, during the SOS program that we were running right across the street here back in 2012, we looked at the numbers and at that time, I think they were running it a little bit inefficiently. The forestry department cost $800,000 a year, and they made about $800,000 a year.
It depends what year, because I said, the market, how much volume did he cut? How high is the market? Right now, we're not cutting nothing because we're not going to get nothing. By the time we pay the logger and the reforestation and everything, so we're really not doing much.
So what you're saying is it's not a massive windfall. It just helps pay for juvenile justice. It's
still a positive, though. It's not a negative.
Sure.
It's still a positive.
Right.
Yeah.
And the criticism is that if you had sold it, I mean, this is a secondary criticism by the recall committee, that you could have then flipped it into another property and made a few, real estate moves and, cornered the market on timber producing property in the county or something like that. Well,
that is timber producing property. That's some of our best property out in Williams.
Right. No, but what they're suggesting is you could have sold it high and then bought some other at the low and,
I don't know if you're buying flipping it at the low.
Yeah. Understood.
I think you're going to be trading pretty much equal. Okay. Now, what exactly did that petition say on the pipe for? Because I think there was some other language in there.
Yeah. It says here, and these, by the way, this is just the 6 points. It doesn't go into the greater details that they talk about. But number one, bad faith negotiations in the Pipe Fork property sale, leading to lost revenue and jeopardizing a Williams community water source.
Well, there's no Williams community water source. We checked with the water master. There's no water rights on Pipe Fork, and there is no community water source out there in Williams. Everybody's on a well.
Okay.
So there's no domestic water rights on Pipe Fork and East Fork and Williams Creek, I think they told me. All of them. So Pipe Fork runs into East Fork runs into Williams Creek. So I don't know what they mean by Williams Community Water Source.
Yeah, and when they were here, I should have pushed a little on that just to get a better definition of what they meant by that. They never claimed that it was a Williams domestic water source. They said Williams community water source, and
whatever that is.
Yeah, what the difference is, I really don't understand it. So
right, but just so you know, there's no water rights on Pipe Fork. It's not somebody is taking the water from Pipe Fork right now.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, so ignored the will of the voters by eliminating funding for community programs, including OSU Extension, law enforcement, and public health.
All right, OXU Extension. I think Pat wants to stay away from that because his grandkids are part of that Youth for Ag.
Oh, okay.
So I think he likes to keep an arm's length away from that. We defunded OSU for a few things. The first thing is, if you go back to the 90s and you go look at the voters' pamphlet when that measure went on there.
94, I believe. Yeah.
It was all about the kids, 4-H kids. It was all about the livestock. There was about 590 kids in that program.
That's amazing.
Back then. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And then if you went through all of that and you got down to the fine print, it mentioned some of the other programs, Master Gardeners, but it was sold on it's for the kids. You know? And that's when the young farmers were running the auction, and it was a big deal. Well, then over the years, the kids kind of diminished just because kids have diminished in Josephine County. We're an older county.
Yeah,
they've just went down. So, and then they got sideways with Oregon State Extension Service over some religious logos on T-shirts and stuff like that.
Yeah, I heard about that.
They got all upside down, and so a vast majority of the kids left, and they started their own group.
Right. That's the Youth in Ag you're talking about.
Right.
So, I mean, it just seems a little bit weird to me that the OSU would care that much. I mean, somebody could be wearing, an Ode to Satan T-shirt with all kinds of bizarre imagery, and that would probably be okay. But if you're somehow, I think it's Christianity that's the big bugaboo there.
Well, that, and then it's just OSU. If you go to Oregon State Extension Service website, unless they've taken it down, but it's all about, they'll say diversity, equity, and all that.
Right. And Christianity's part of that, I would think.
Well, you would think. And who cares if somebody has a cross on their T-shirt?
I don't.
Or Joe's Place means Jesus over everything. Who cares?
Okay.
Whatever.
Yeah. It's a silly thing. But this is what drove these other people out of it to form Youth in Ag. And they seem to be happy with that, even though they're not being subsidized at all.
They're not being subsidized, and if you look at the auction amount, let's see, they had 290. Oh, don't hold me to these numbers, but I think it was just under 300 kids participating in the livestock auction, and the Grants Pass Active Club is the sponsor for the auction now. $860,000.
Wow.
Yeah. Don't tell me that program's not successful. So, anyways, they're doing their own thing. So now almost all the kids left. There was still some kids in shooting sports and a couple others, but it's just a small amount. So then we started talking, well, that's $400,000 and some $1,000, and all the kids have left. So what are we spending all this money on? Then we got in this big wrestling contest with Oregon State Extension Service over how they're spending the money. And they'd just give us bits and pieces of their budget. And I said, well, I want the whole budget. They wouldn't do it. I want the whole budget. None of your business. So finally, I went to Art Robinson and Dwayne Yonker, state representatives. Now, remember, I spent 8 years in the Senate. I know how this works. As a senator, I go to a state agency, and I said, I want to see this, and they have to produce it. So Dwayne Yonker went to him and says, I want all your books, all your budget. I want your budget. I want your expenses. I want your income. They made him pay for a public records request.
Wow.
Your state representative.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So we got it, and there were still some things missing, but we started seeing the money they're spending on travel. It was all employees. What do all these people do? So we said, no, not interested. And so we did not renew their contract, and it's went away.
And so, from what I understand, we were paying about $450,000 a year in taxes, and that then activates their ability to get a grant from the federal government for another $750,000 or something of that nature, and then you don't have any accounting on what they have been paying for.
We don't have a total accounting on everything.
Okay.
We've got bits and pieces. Listen.
Do you think that it exceeded the $450,000 that we're paying?
Oh yeah. And it was all on. It was so much labor and travel and stuff.
Oh no, I mean what they sent back here. Do you think most of it was staying in Corvallis?
I don't know where it was going because
they won't give you the
we don't have the. But after 8 years in the Senate and I was on the Revenue Finance Committee the whole time, I've dealt with these state agencies before, and I see all that, and I'm thinking to myself, all this money is going for employees and travel and stuff. Why isn't it going to the programs?
Right.
And they go, well, it is going to the programs. And if it is going to the programs, why do the 4-H kids got to pay to be in the program? How come the master gardeners have to pay to be in the program if the money's going in the program?
And the number that I heard was 14.4 employees directly for the benefit of Josephine County. So I'm wondering how many employees because there's a number of counties here in Oregon. There is only one other county that's not contributing to this, and that's Multnomah.
That's correct.
So each of these counties has theoretically a number of OSU employees dedicated full time to benefiting that county. I'd love to see the spreadsheet on this of who they're paying, how many employees they're paying for the entire, or is the whole thing just a big slush fund scam?
Well, that's what I'm worried about, and I hope our representatives kind of look into that. I was actually working with Open to Books. You heard of Open to Books?
No.
So that's Adam Jureski. He's got one of those names that I really struggle with. Anyways, he does Open to Books, and he's nationwide. He looks at federal government, state governments. He's done a tremendous job, and I had contacted him about doing Open to Books for Oregon. And he just passed away, 55 years old.
Yeah. So,
I don't know. They say they're going to continue that on. That's a great outfit, Open to Books. They analyze these government agencies, and it's amazing what they find. Mm-hmm. And Oregon State Extension Service needs to be scrutinized, in my opinion. I can't give you the definitive answer on all this because I don't have the information. And if I don't have the information, I'm a no vote.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see here. And that was the OSU, and now law enforcement and public health.
Law enforcement, we funded with 5 extra deputies. I heard somebody say we didn't give them all their money that, we just passed a law enforcement district.
Right.
Somebody said that. I said, we can't do that. They get every dime. We can't do any. There's no discretionary.
Right.
That has to go to the sheriff.
Yeah, no, I seem to remember that.
Yeah. So in addition, out of the general fund, we gave him general fund dollars. And we don't have a lot of general fund dollars since the ONC stuff has all collapsed and gone away, and it ain't coming back either. We ought to do a podcast on that sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, so we gave him 5 deputies. And so we gave him 5 deputies on top of the money that the citizens voted for the district. So he's in pretty good shape.
So that's additional. That's not less.
No, that's additional.
Yeah, it's okay.
The sheriff asked for 10, and we said we can't do 10. We can do 5.
Okay.
This is outside the district. This is in addition to the district. The sheriff wanted 10 deputies, and we said only 5. And then he agreed because he says, I don't think I can hire 10. I don't think they're out there to hire. So, and you know what? The sheriff was in my office. He's really concerned about that. And I said, Dave, just bear with me. You'll be fine. And so when it came to the budget committee, I said, I figured out how to give the sheriff 5 extra deputies. And we had to cut the health department a little bit, and we had to cut some other departments a little bit with their general funding. And the budget committee voted unanimously for it. And Dave came up and he said, you're a man of your word. You said you'd do it, and you did it. So I don't know what they're talking about.
There was a claim that like 1,200 kids would be cut off a WIC or something like this.
A WIC program is a federal program that stands on its own. Okay? It just stands on its own. If the program goes away, then the program goes away. If some of the program it goes away. But we can't cut WIC program. It stands on its own.
Understood.
Yeah.
So you don't understand what they meant by that. From what I understand, there's something that you guys are doing now where you're consolidating departments and perhaps eliminating some of the managers in there, so you have more Indians and less chiefs.
Yep. Well, we're putting things where they should belong. Solid waste was with the health department. We moved it. Solid waste works hand in hand with code enforcement. So we moved it over to community development, where code enforcement, because he has an office. Tell me if this sounds efficient. He has an office at the health department. He has an office over at code enforcement. He has 2 offices, and he has 2 directors. So out of the money that goes to solid waste, some of the money goes to the health director, and some of the money goes to the planning director. I said, that's stupid. Let's have one office where he works most of the time. And so we moved him over there. Our health director was kind of spreading things around, and we did bump into some problems because you can't take grant money that's purposed for one thing and use a little bit for something else. And we had a little bit of that going on. We've corrected that now. We have corrected that now. And so we've shrunk the health department a little bit. We took emergency services out of the health department and put it with emergency management. It's a better fit. It's not a big program, and it's highly dependent on funding from the state. If the funding goes away, the program goes away. And we have no idea what's going to happen this next year.
All right, then. West has shown a pattern of violating state laws, including campaign finance regulations and public meeting laws, and is currently facing several pending ethics and labor law violations.
So I'll tell you one thing that I've noticed about John West. He's not afraid to put his money where his mouth is. And you can spend money on advertisement and stuff. You don't have to run it through a PAC. If he wants to spend his own money, where you got to run money through a PAC is where people are donating money to you, and then you take their money and spend it. That has to go through a PAC.
Right, and I think they totally misunderstand that. They assume that everybody who
Jay Meredith got
it.
Yeah, he got it all. He does not understand that space.
Yeah. So he's not guilty of campaign finance violations for the advertisements that you've seen around town or in the sneak preview. If they say that they're paid for by John West, they're paid for by John West.
Yeah, and the one that I really take my hat off, I don't agree with everything with John, but I take my hat off when he pays, I know it's about $1,000 for the sneak preview, somewhere in that neighborhood, and just telling the people of what's going on in the county commissioner's office because the Daily Courier don't put it. And he's taking his own money and putting that. It has nothing to do with campaigning or whatever. He's informing people.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Yeah. Good luck finding that. I mean, that's pretty rare.
I've never done it.
Yeah.
I've never done it my whole political career. And I've seen him do that several times. I'm like, ooh.
Well,
he'll put his money where his mouth is.
Okay, so that's the campaign finance violations. The public meeting law. Now, there's rumors going around from people. J.J. Schofield says he saw John West and I guess you, or maybe Dan DeYoung, talking together out of school or something.
What were we talking about? That's what's important. It's not talking. So just because two of us make a quorum doesn't mean we can't talk to each other. It's serial, this is really important, serial deliberation. Not just deliberation, serial. Serial deliberation means where you deliberate a little bits and pieces, over a period of time. So it's not just deliberations, it's serial deliberations. And, I've had commissioners, and I'm not going to mention names, start talking about something, and I'll turn around and I say, put it on the agenda. Okay? Because it's really easy to start talking about an issue and not realize that, hey,
you're going over the line.
You're going over the line. And I always say, put it on the agenda. Throw it on the agenda, And
it's just as easy to talk about it there,
So I could go to you and I could say, I'm going to put Department X on the agenda over this issue next week. That's not deliberating.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what I'm going to do.
Understood.
We're going to talk about it in the meeting then. So, but, Dan and I have a lot in common with cars. We used to sit in the office sometimes, and talk about cars and catalogs. And, DeYoung is very knowledgeable in that and helps me out.
Is. I've heard him talk about cars quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
It's kind of hard to talk to Dan without talking about cars.
And we just can talk about, I call it fluff. It's just conversation. It's just we can't talk about county business and serial deliberate. Remember, it's not just deliberation. I think that's where politicians get things wrong. They say, well, we're not deliberating. But are you serial deliberating? Are you deliberating in little bits and pieces? So this conversation, I say a little bit. Tomorrow, I say a little bit. And the next day, I say a little bit. That's serial deliberation. You have to be mindful of that, too.
I would imagine, first of all, I'd need a definition of that contained an example.
I'll give you an example. Let's use the Sportsman Park. You're the other commissioner. Have you heard that the Sportsman's Park, we have a violation of a grant? You say no.
Oh, no, I have not heard that.
And then tomorrow I say, the violation of the grant, the next day I say, the violation of the grant was the cell tower. And you say, And then you say, did you know that violation, we will have to try to find another comparable piece of property to trade to?
You're building a case.
Yes,
is what you're doing.
You got it now. That's serial deliberation.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay?
Yeah, I think it's helpful. People don't know this. I didn't know this prior to these series of interviews here. I knew that there was something. I thought if you were coming out of your office and you saw somebody coming in the other side of the office, you had to turn around and go the other way.
No. And, in the Senate, it's even a little more complicated because you'll have 5 people on a committee. Okay, so it takes 3 to have a quorum. But then you do all these functions all the time together. You go to dinner and stuff like that. And you're looking around like if you and I are on a committee, we can talk all the merits of any of the issue. But if there's one more person there, then we can't. So you have to look around and say, is there 3 of us here?
Yeah, that's right.
So it gets even a little more complicated in the Senate.
Yeah. Interesting. So what's your angle on that? Have you observed any of that? They're suggesting that he's doing this all the time. And when they say public meeting law, that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about he's running the meeting the wrong way.
No.
They're talking about that he's having inappropriate
he's deliberating
discussion
outside a public meeting.
Bingo.
Yeah,
Bingo.
That's what he's doing.
Okay.
And I don't see any of that. And John's never been in politics. I've been in politics a while now, so I have a lot better understanding of how things work. And so I'm always there saying, now he's the chair and he's learning that, and he doesn't realize how much power the chair has yet. But I'm always prompting him, do this, do that, don't do that, And he's learning. He's learning. He's only been in politics for 2 years, so. When I first got think that
whole Robert's Rules of Order would take me a while to get down with myself.
Yeah, in the Senate we used Masons, and but here at the county,
see, I didn't even know there was another one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're similar but different. But John's learning. He's actually doing a pretty good job.
Okay, so now it says and is currently facing several pending ethics and labor law violations.
So what?
Yeah. Right.
Every time somebody's been mad at me in the Senate, I get another ethics complaint. I've never had. They've all been dismissed. You remember that walkout we did? I led that walkout, a big walkout and everything. When we finally came back, I had
hundreds of them. Yeah.
And so it was so many. It was just absolutely unbelievable. And so I had to set up a legal defense fund, which was a pain in the neck. Then I had to get donations to fund it. Then I had to get an attorney. And anyways, it was a 1.5-year process and everything. But when all the dust settled, it was about $55,000 attorney bill, and every single one was dismissed.
You know what? I see this going on. And listen, Lily Morgan's got this going on in Gold Hill right now.
Yep.
So she should be one of the first ones to step up and say that these ethics things, these are not a finding of guilt on anybody. They should cast no shadow over somebody's future on the basis of these. Now, it is certainly within the realm of possibility that an ethics complaint bears fruit somehow, and the person really is corrupt, and there's a finding of fact on that. But you should not make any judgment at all prior to some sort of due process.
Yeah, and also the rules are this. I get so frustrated. The rules for the legislature are are a little bit different than the rules for the county commissioner. And the reason for that is a legislator is a citizen legislator. So you got to have another job. You have another job. And so since you're a citizen legislature, the rules are a little bit different. When you're a full-time commissioner or something, they're a little more restrictive. So in the legislature, you could say, I'm in a class, so I'm voting on ODOT, but my company does business with ODOT, but I'm in a class. There's a lot of companies do business with ODOT, so I'm in a class. I used to say, when it was something like that, I'd say out of abundance of caution, I may have a conflict of interest. But in a commissioner, if you have a direct conflict, that's okay. You just have to announce it.
Right.
Okay.
And I think that the conflict of interest is a little bit later in here, but let's just talk about that right now as it relates to Pipe Fork. John, one of the charges is essentially that there is a conflict of interest related to Pipe Fork because John West owns a neighboring property or owns a company that owns a neighboring property, or it even goes as far as a friend of John West owns a neighboring property, and that he would benefit somehow by the action that he has taken as a commissioner.
Well, from what I understand, he sold that property 4 or 5 years ago, so he doesn't own it.
He brought me some documentation that said that he sold the company which owned the property, and I guess he did a trade with a friend. He showed me the contract of it. It happened in 2020, so that was 2 years before he was a commissioner.
Well, if he doesn't own the property, then he doesn't have a conflict. You can't say a friend, just a friend. A family member, you better say my family member. Friend, listen, there's only 88,000 people in this county. I've been in business as an employer for a long time. I know a lot of people that I consider friends. So
you'd have a hard time doing any sort of business.
So it's usually yourself, an immediate family member. Okay, not a third cousin or something like that, but immediate family. Kids, wife, brother, sister, mom, dad, that kind of thing.
So I brought this up, and I suggested to them that, it isn't really a benefit to, even if it's to his friend, and I'm assuming they think it was appraised at a certain value, and that says something about the value of that property for a future potential sale of the neighboring property. It would positively affect its property value. And then I told them that in my experience, that only happens with comps.
Right.
If you have a sale that takes place, then there's a comparable that can then be used to determine the value of neighboring properties.
Within a certain period of time.
Oh, I see.
It can't be 10 years ago. That's not a good comp.
So it has to be recent.
It has to be fairly recent. Yeah.
Okay. And so then that would be, but if the sale didn't take place, then the idea that he is conflicted because he's trying to help out his friend, that falls flat somehow.
Lily was trying to explain that, and I just couldn't follow her because it didn't make any sense what she was saying.
Yes. It immediately took a turn and went for about 5 minutes in the other direction.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I call that obfuscation.
Oh, yes. Yeah. But, to have a comp. But let's back up a little bit. Even you say it's an ethics violation. Say it was a family member himself, that would be an ethics violation. That doesn't mean they're going to take your birthday away. That means you're going to get a little fine, okay, because you didn't declare. Now, if he owned the property or his daughter owned the property, and he was at the meeting, he says, "Oh, I want to just announce I may have a conflict of interest. My family member owns that property." He continues to vote. That's the only difference. He announces it. That's the only difference. It doesn't mean he can't take part in the vote. He still votes. You just have to announce it.
Interesting. Okay, so let's see here.
Or he could abstain if he wanted to, but he doesn't have to. Okay. In the Senate, you can never abstain from a vote. Even if you have direct conflict, even if you're directly benefiting from the bill, you have to state the conflict of interest and then vote.
Okay. So, unlawfully approved a library district withdrawal leading to costly litigation.
Oh my! These people. So there is a process to withdraw from a library district. Our staff gave us. They come up with a form. They said this is the procedure. We started the procedure. Individual came in. They followed our procedure.
See, this is why I believe that it's so important to get a definition of unlawfully.
I don't know.
Unlawfully approved. What do you mean? Do you mean that it's unlawful to withdraw from a library district, and you somehow facilitated an illegal process, or as I read it, if you did the wrong thing, if you did the procedure incorrectly, then what it means is that you inadvertently made a mistake, and that is a recall punishable crime.
Had nothing to do with John West. That was our team gave us that.
Right. The legal department gave you the process, and it turned out to be the wrong process.
And I don't blame our legal department, because how that went down is, so we started this procedure, and the people filed the papers, did everything right, came before us. I asked the one question I asked them is your property served by the library district? They said no. That's basically all I had to have for the evidence based on what we knew then. So we did that. They had people come up and speak, and we're listening. We had people that were very emotional about it, and we're trying to destroy the district and all this stuff. That's not true. Then we had one gentleman come up there, and he started pointing out some statutes. And one of the statutes, I go, I don't remember seeing that statute. So I got on my phone and I looked, and I'm pretty good with statutes after 8 years in the Senate. That's your world. And I go, I don't remember seeing that. So as soon as he said, when he got done, or shortly thereafter, I made a motion that we suspend all withdrawals and all annexations until we examine the process at that point. And the other two commissioners agreed. And
okay.
We suspended everything.
So right then, is that before or after the library?
Before.
That's before the library took any sort of legal action.
Always remember the president of the library is an attorney in Ashland, and guess where that attorney outfit was from? So
Ashland?
That area, yeah.
Okay, so then
there's no way they had to spend that money. We suspended everything. And that's exactly what we did. I went to the legal staff. Now, the long version is after we did that, we found out you had to really be careful how you read those statutes, because this statute would point you to this statute, and then there would be a piece of that statute would point you to that statute. And it went way back to the 60s. Wow. The legislature really needs to clean that up, because when you keep building statutes,
you could get one thing wrong,
and that's what we did.
Well, and as I understand it, and I've said this before, apparently everybody who attempted to or did opt into the library district voluntarily, that was all done with the wrong process as well.
That was done wrong too. We had to get the association of taxing districts involved, and
so does that mean they're going to have to go back and revisit all of those annexations, or no?
We're not going to do that.
Okay.
Because it's a moot point, even though it wasn't done to the letter of the law. If we redid them, they were going to be in the same spot. Okay. The people that are different are the withdrawals. It's a much higher bar. Takes a lot more tenacity. Okay, so
and as of yet, to be clear, no one has left the district.
No one has left a district. And I heard Pat the other morning. Was it this morning? Yesterday? Today? Yesterday? I don't know. Whenever it was.
Today. He was on Bill Maher.
When he said, "Oh, if this happened, then you can get out of law enforcement districts, irrigation districts." He's wrong.
It's not true.
It's not true. Those districts, irrigation districts, fall under the 545 chapters. They have their own law enforcement. There's 20 some districts that fall under the same statute that have a process to withdraw. So he's wrong on that again.
Okay. All right, here. West has shown a pattern of threatening community safety by reducing the Firewise program, reducing emergency management program, and eliminating property development fire standards.
So Firewise, that's an easy one. We had 2 Firewise coordinators. We could have ran both Firewise coordinators probably to the end of the year, then the program would end. Or if we got rid of one Firewise program coordinator, we probably could get another year out of the money, because they're not talking about, usually by now they're talking about, doing the grant again. Well, they're not talking about doing this grant again. So I don't know if it's going to come or not.
Oh, wow. So
we went to one Firewise coordinator and tried to get some longevity out of it. Other than that, it would have ended in a few months anyways.
Well, that's one of the things that Jay Meredith said, was that there was like 4 years worth of funding in there.
No, for a guy that was a finance director for a city, he needs to do a better job counting.
Okay.
Because it's not there.
All right. So what about the reduction of the emergency management program?
If the grant funding is reduced, the program is reduced. There's no general fund in it. It's that simple.
Okay.
All
right. Hired unqualified political allies for key county employee and contract positions.
Okay, so obviously that's over Mr. Sellers. Mr. Sellers worked for me 8 years in the Senate. He did a fabulous job there. I guess, I've had hundreds of employees. I've been an employer since the 1980s. I've just passed that on to my sons a couple years ago. There's been hundreds of people that have worked for me. I guess none of them can apply for a job at the county because they worked for me. And that's not qualified. I think they better be very careful because Michael Sellers is not a political. They're talking. He's got a master's degree in cybersecurity. Okay, he knows what. And it came down between. To be honest with you, there was a guy in Idaho, and there was a guy in Michael Sellers, and they were pretty parallel with their experience, their trainings. Michael's education seemed to be a little more. The guy's experience doing the job was a little more. But what made my decision, obviously, I'm going to be biased. I said it. I said it right there when I made my decision. I said, everybody needs to know I'm biased because I've had the opportunity working with the person for 8 years. I can't ignore that. Okay. Right. I know what he can do. All right. So I said I'm biased. And the other thing with the other individual is he has had several jobs. He hasn't stayed at one place for a long time, and that was kind of a concern. So it was an easy decision for me. I don't think it was as easy for John, though, So it was, and Dan, he said, I don't even want, he just left the room. He didn't even want to participate. So anyways, Sellers got the job. He's done a marvelous job. He's a detail guy. I know this. John doesn't know that. He didn't work for John for 8 years. He worked for me 8 years, and I know his capabilities. So this morning, after I dumped a bunch of videos on YouTube and all over Facebook last night, and they're getting a fair amount of play. And a local Facebook group admin, Mark Kelsey, you know who I'm talking about? No idea.
Anyway, he says, watching West portion, He stated that Michael Sellers has an extensive background in emergency management. I've researched on this, and the only thing that comes up is an IT background with zero EM experience. If that's the case, then it's going to lead me to believe that everything Wes said is complete falsity.
I think Michael draws his emergency management from his years in the Marines, is where he draws that from. He also had some qualifications. I looked at him because that's my wheelhouse and so he had I think 100, 200, 3, 4, 700. So he's had a bunch of classes in that. But what's really interesting, when our human resources saying, well, we got to have lots of experience in this, and he was telling we got to have an experience. So I walked in the office one day and I said, can I have our former emergency manager director's folder or personnel folder? And he was kind of reluctant to give. I said, I said, I want it. Now it's not, can I have it? I just want it. I'm the county commissioner. So he gave it to me and I sat right there at the table and went through that. You know how much she had before she got hired by the county as an assistant emergency management director? 0. Now all of a sudden we've got to have, and little old Josephine County, you're really, if you're going to get somebody that has a heck of a resume on emergency management, they're probably not going to have much of a resume on IT.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. The notion was, and Jay Meredith, when he was sitting here, he said that Michael Sellers has no emergency management experience.
He has some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see here. And I think, yes, of course, there would be the other big deal here that they specifically mention is the hiring of Simon Hare on an alleged $80,000 contract.
Well, I've never seen an $80,000 contract. I'll have to ask Sandy. I will do that when I get to the office tomorrow, if there was such thing, because I don't know of it. And so I don't know. We hire people all the time to do little things for us without a contract. We do it all the time. Little stuff. Big stuff is different.
Right, but there's a procedure based on, as commissioners, you talk about it with one another, and you probably vote as to whether to do that.
I think that was something was without objection. Because it's so when something is really, if it's not a board order or resolution, we don't vote. We just say without objection.
Okay.
If somebody objects, then you got to take a vote.
But that sets forth a process going through legal to, ultimately end in a contract of sorts. So there's a procedure there. It's not like you go over to the finance people and say, "Hey, cut this guy a check."
Well, yes, there's a scope of what we're asking for. It might not be very defined, but there'll be a scope. We do that all the time. When the sheriff goes and does a marijuana raid, we hire contractors to come in with equipment and stuff like that, and it's pretty brief. And we do it when we're cleaning up properties and stuff like that. We do a scope of work and an estimate of how much it costs. The interesting thing about Simon Hare is he was suggested by the former IT director to do this work before he retired. So I don't know. Yeah.
So, okay.
That's a nothing burger as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Bigger fish to fry.
So, is there anything in the 6 that you think is an issue?
Not an issue for recall. I mean, none of us are perfect. John has done some things wrong. He's presented, some information that wasn't accurate on certain issues, and that's why we have 3 commissioners. And we sit there and I go, wait a second.
Yeah, it's a check and balance.
That's
not
right. This, and I'm the same way. Nobody's going to be perfect, but for a recall, no. And I will tell you, and whoever listens to your tape, I've worked with a lot of politicians. This guy is, sometimes it even drives me a little bit like John, you're over the top. This guy worries about money, taxpayer money. I mean, he's down to the $100. I've never really seen another politician. I'm not like that. Okay. I mean, I worry about the taxpayer dollars, but not down to the level that he does. You know, I mean, he really does. You know, like I said, I worry about the taxpayer dollars in the grand scheme of things. He digs down a lot farther than I do. Mm. I mean, he digs right down where he's talking, well, we can save a couple $100 a day doing this. And he's right. It's like he's on, I got to take my hat off. You know, he came up with this idea for a motor pool. And now the money we're going to save is we're kind of squeezing it out of the directors. I mean, it's actually quite a bit.
Yeah. You know what? This is one of the things that frustrated me a lot back in the day when we were, talking about law enforcement funding, and they'd say, we're cut to the bone. And I always thought, there's something missing here. We're not getting the whole story. And this situation where you take something simple like the motor pool situation, and all of a sudden you've got $500,000
right.
or something.
Right. And, I don't want to give you, I don't want to give you the impression that I don't care about dollar. I do. Because I've always believed, government has no money. The only money government has is what it takes from somebody else. So I really believe that. But if I expect my my person at services to worry about how much light bulbs cost. That's not my job. That's his job.
Right.
John will dig down. He will dig down and figure out how much that light bulb costs. I've seen him do it.
I mean, the devil is in the details.
I take but you only have so much time in a day, too.
Right.
Somewhere you gotta, I'm worried about, because, Mike, I will tell you, when you're in government, it's nice people doing nice things with other people's money.
Yeah.
When you get right down to it.
Yeah.
And I am very conscious. I listened to some people out in Cave Junction. I was out there with Congressman Bentz last week. And I listened to some people, we got to fund the seniors. We got to fund the homeless. We got to fund, we need food for these people. We need this. And Cliff finally said, and where we get the money.
Yeah, right.
Because, like I said, it's nice people doing nice things with other people's money. But listen, that's why we're $35 trillion upside down.
That's why we're here. And listen, it's not that it has to stop. It's gonna stop. People need to understand. And people that think that like Social Security and Medicare are ironclad forever, no, they're not. I mean, we're inside of a decade here where that stuff can go away. So, what's the motivation for this?
I think the motivation is to tar and feather West, whether they get the signatures or not, and then tie him to a couple other candidates that's currently running. Mm. And so I think it's politically motivated. Most things like this are politically motivated. I come out of the post office last week, and there was two gentlemen there collecting signatures, and I said, hey, why? They didn't know who I was, And then I said, wait, why are you recalling West? And one guy says, it's all the bad things he's done. I said, can you be more specific? Crickets.
Yeah.
So then the other guy all of a sudden kind of recognized me, and he says, well, the Sportsman's Park. Then I told him the story about the Sportsman. Told him that the
Sportsman's Park's not in here.
I know, but that's what he said. It was a sports. He says Sportsman's Park really bothered me, and I'm like, well, John didn't have nothing to do, but let me tell this story. After I told him the story, he goes, well, that makes sense. I didn't read that in the paper. Then the next one was the Flying Lark. He was upset about the Flying Lark. That's not in here either. And I said, so why are you upset? He says, well, it's $50 million and you guys are selling for a church for 10. We're losing $40 million. I said, losing $40 million? I said, we had zero money in that. I says, it's a $10 million gift. And I says, you know what we're going to do with the $10 million? We already set up a program. It works like an endowment. It's not an endowment. It works like one. that money stays there and it gets interest in the statewide banking system, which is about 5.25% right now. And the fairgrounds gets the interest, about $500,000 a year, to run the fairgrounds. And the principal never changes. You can never touch the principal. And the guy says, that's a fantastic idea. He goes, I never read that in the paper. So there you have it. So I don't know if that guy is still going to recall John West or not, but I will tell you, he's a new politician. He's learning the process, but I will say he's very dedicated to how we're spending the taxpayer dollars. And, he's very dedicated. I am too, but he's dedicated in a more refined way than I am. Okay? Yeah. He really gets down in the weeds. We call that getting in the weeds.
Yeah. I think we've hit everything here. Is there anything you want to say in summation?
Well, I think it's very politically motivated, obviously with the elections coming on, and I think they're trying to tie a couple candidates to John. But here's something that everybody needs to be concerned with. When you recall let's say they're successful with the signatures and they get enough votes to recall them, the other two commissioners pick who the next commissioner is. Not the public, not the voters, the other two commissioners. And so right now you have, two commissioners that was picked by the people and one commissioner that was picked by the other two commissioners. Some people didn't like that pick. So That's what you get. So just because you recall somebody, you never know who you're going to get next.
So then whoever they appoint will be in there for another 2 years because John's only halfway through his.
Yep.
Okay.
So the other two commissioners are going to pick somebody for the next 2 years, and the voters don't have a say-so on it. So that's something to take into consideration. Well, I appreciate it, Mike.
I appreciate you stopping in here.
And, if somebody wants to contact me and ask me for more details, I'm more than happy. Get a hold of me down at the courthouse, leave a message or what. If I'm not there, I'll get back with you. So.
All right.
All right. Thanks,
Herman.
Take care.
Yep.